Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss The Monuments Men, starring George Clooney, Matt Damon, Bill Murray, John Goodman, Jean D. Hardin, Bob Balaban, Hugh Bonneville, and Kate Blanchett, directed by George Clooney. Now, before I get into this movie, my dad has read this book before, as it was based on a book by Robert M. Edsel and Brett Witter. And like I said just a minute ago, my dad has read this book. And what does he think of this movie? Well, maybe the same as everybody else, but what do I think? Well, I'm not going to say yet, but I do remember some bad memories about it. And I have seen this movie before in theaters, and I haven't gone back since to watch it again. So that maybe tells you something, but let's get into this movie. This is a biopic taking place at around World War II as we start in an art house in Ghent, Belgium, or Ghent, Belgium, something like that. I forget how you say it. With some Germans stealing a piece of art as it is March 1943. And we move on to Paris, France, where they support Hitler in his dictatorship. And Colonel Wagner joins General Stahl as they steal some art see some art while Claire Simone, played by Kate Blanchett, is there and she fetches some champagne as an employee spits in it. And we move on to New York City in 1944 and we meet Frank Stokes, played by the movie's director George Clooney, talking with his commanding officers about getting that piece of art back and comes up with the team as well as a plan on how to get it back. And this movie is going all over the place as these first three scenes are a mess as this whole movie. Like I said, I don't have that very fond memories of this film. Frank hires his team called the Monuments Men with artist Jim Granger, played by Matt Damon, architect Richard Campbell, played by Bill Murray, archaeologist Walter Garfield, played by John Goodman, a private Preston Savitz, played by Bob Balaban, and director of plays Donald Jeffries, played by Hugh Bonneville, and a Frenchman named Jean-Claude Claremont, played by Jean Dujardin from The Artist, as they meet Private Sam Epstein as well as each other at the battlefield. And the characters are flat, as there's a few I like, for example, George Clooney, Matt Damon, and John Goodman, but the only one that feels completely out of place, and probably, in my opinion, the worst performance of this whole movie, was Bill Murray. And I'll explain why a little later, as he has been in a war movie, which happens to be a comedy called Stripes, which I saw as recent as last year and thought that was a pretty good movie. But as far as the other actors goes, Hugh Bonneville I have reviewed before, as he was Mr. Brown in the first two Paddington films. And Bob Balaban I reviewed before in 5 Wes Anderson films, from Moonrise Kingdom to recently Asteroid City, as well as Lady in the Water and Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. But they're flat, but the worst performance, in my opinion, goes to Bill Murray, as he's more of a comedic actor than a serious actor. Claire gets a visit from Colonel Wagner, as she's frightened while James gets to France and speaks French, and people ask him to speak English because his French is bad. And as they're correct about that, his French is awful, and the performances are very bad in this movie. James meets Emile or something like that, played by the movie's composer, Alexandre Desplat, whom I like his previous works in other movies like Grand Budapest Hotel, to Shape of Water, to so many other films that I've reviewed of his composing work. And I'll give the movie this, as he's probably the best actor in the movie, as he's a composer, and that's not saying much, and his performance was average. While Claire sees Stahl at the train station, and Stahl shoots at her and misses her while she's not afraid, which is a questionable choice from Kate Blanchett, whom I expect better from also, which is a real shame that, from what my father says, the book is much better than the way this movie is presented on screen, which is so far awful. James goes to Claire in a prison and she tells him she's a spy, and she also asks him to stop speaking French as he's terrible at it, and their chemistry sucks as the actors in this movie are phoning it in. Preston goes to a French church and he asks to speak to the priests, but he can't, And next scene, you know, he goes outside and bumps into a German hostage as Richard comes in with a gun and lets the prisoner have a cigarette, as well as Preston, who doesn't smoke but forces him to, and lets the German hostage go. And that's how the whole and that's not how the whole thing with the war works back, even back in World War II. If you hold your hostage captive, you either kill him, or if the second person comes in with a gun, then you need to kill that person as well. But nope, he just lets him go, which doesn't work for me at all. Jean-Claude and Walter get shot at by a kid in the building. Jean-Claude gets the kid while Walter shoots back, and Jean-Claude gets the kid out of there, which was painfully a stupid scene, as it's shot horribly, and it was horrible to watch at times. Donald asks to get some people home, and his request gets denied by the commanding officer, as I can't understand what in the hell is happening in this movie, as it is all over the place, to the point it was a mess. Donald goes to a church with the priests and prays as he gets shot and killed while he narrates what he's written to his family on a note, as he disobeyed a commanding officer's order, and it gets him killed, which is unbelievably bad. James goes to the art room where Claire works at, and he takes a piece of art to take it to an apartment to hang up while she follows him there, as these shots are dreadful, and this is a bad looking movie that I wanted to be better than it was at the end of the day. I feel like the two authors I brought up at the beginning should be insulted by this movie. James talks with Claire about how much he wants to help her, and he needs his men to get out of Germany, where they're currently trapped at, as Richard gets his teeth checked out by a dentist after eating a piece of jerky, and Preston comes with him. And after that, the dentist takes them to his place where he meets his family, as it ends with the two Americans saying, "Hail Hitler." That's not my saying, that's the movie's saying, which are terribly awkward scenes. Walter and Jean-Claude drive behind enemy lines and see a horse, and the horse eventually runs away as Walter sees German soldiers hiding in the bushes, and Jean-Claude finds out and runs for his life and gets shot and killed within hours, and try to get him healed, but is unfortunately too late. And I can't believe he gets killed, as Jean Dujardin has charisma from the artist to his brief role in The Wolf of Wall Street, and Walter wants to continue the mission, as that was painfully acted by Dujardin and John Goodman. The soldiers go underground, and they find stolen arts while underground, and James meets with Claire at a restaurant and have a chat while she brings up the month of April, as it's that time of the year, and the French have songs about their country in the month of April, and he leaves the next morning to rejoin the soldiers, and he goes to a place with her, as the dialogue in these scenes are not good at all, and the editing felt choppy in this whole movie, and I'm an hour and 20 minutes into this 2-hour movie, as it feels irritating. James gets back to the soldiers from France and finds Frank says something like the Madonna, whatever the hell they're looking for, isn't here, while at nighttime they find a crap ton of gold in the cave, and I don't get what in the hell is happening at this point in the movie. Like, I don't know. James steps on an unexpected landmark that is going to go kaboom, and Frank and Walter ask him the same question, which is, why would he do that? As that is a questionable choice, and they find a way to get James off the landmark, and as he steps off and it explodes by a little, which was a tad bit stupid of a scene in my opinion. The soldiers get to the outside of Germany and get in the library and find the location of the missing piece of art. And Germany surrendered as the war is over, and Colonel Wagner is interrogated by Frank about the missing piece of art, as Frank offers him a cigarette, and James thinks about exploring the tunnel to find the missing art, as they do find it, while the commanding officer arrives, and Richard tells Preston as they found it, as well as James says, get the hell out, they gotta get the hell out of there. And Frank finds more than art than they can imagine, and they get the hell out of the cave, or the tunnel, let's say, and collect it, and collects it and brings it back to their Russian friends, and they all get back to their lives. And Claire gets her art back thanks to James. And we move on to Frank as a grandfather in the 1970s, taking his grandson to a church and visits an old friend. And this climax is a mess, as this entire damn movie. Now it's time for my rating. I'll give this movie a 3.1 out of 10. The actors are terrible in their performances, but the worst and most out of place was Bill Murray, as I would rather watch Stripes than this for damn sure, as they phoned it in, make questionable choices, and I expected better from this movie than what it was presented on screen. And I'm going back to what my father said, as he has read the book, that the book is a much better than this movie, and this is an awful film. And I can't follow who is who, as well as the plot of the movie, going all over the place, and the shots were horrible to watch, as this is a mess of a movie, as it is surprisingly unbelievably bad, as this is a bad looking movie, as the shots were bad, and I wanted this movie to be better, but at the end of the day, it worsens in my memory, as this is so far the worst George Clooney could get, as well as Suburbicon, which is up next in George Clooney's filmography, and I'll talk about it next time. And it's sad to me that George Clooney decided to direct this dreadful film, as there's things I questioned throughout the show, as it's not the way to do a war film, as this is unfortunately a non-recommendation. And if I were you, instead of viewing this movie, if you haven't yet, just stick to the book, as this shouldn't have been a movie to begin with. And I personally have never read the book, but I hear it's better than this movie, and the authors should be very insulted by this movie for its existence and the way George Clooney did it. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and next time I will be back with Suburbicon. And until then, good night.